Hey guys, I'm Katie.
And I'm Alexis, and this is the Check Your Aesthetic podcast.
Happy New Year!
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today.
I wanna be a part of it. New York.
Triggered that I'm not going to New York.
When this episode comes out, it's going to be so long from when you were supposed to have gone to New York, but right now it's a week before you were supposed to have gone to New York.
Yes.
We're having a crazy week recording. So we've recorded, this is our third episode this week. So you guys are hearing a lot of the same shit from us in many weeks after it's already happened. So
yes.
But yeah, so this
the reality is that we will not be recording for
a while.
I think like a good amount of time.
Yeah, which we deserve it, honestly. Peace and love. We love you guys and we love the pod, but it's 3 episodes a week is a lot to record. But happy 2022. When this episode comes out, it will mean that we have done like one full calendar year of our first full calendar year of CYA would have been 2021.
Yes.
Which is crazy.
Very true. Except we did not do every week.
Well,
we did not upload.
We only missed like 2. A lot of other podcasts do like seasons. We've talked about this before, like how we don't. And I'm like, we didn't really think of that one, but that probably would have been smart.
Yeah,
we just disappear.
But also
like okay, season 1 was a year and a half long.
Season 1 was 60 episodes.
We will see you guys soon.
Yeah, but also I think that like, because we talked about that and like splitting it up into different content, I feel like that would get boring. Like I think it's good to like switch it up.
I agree.
So,
but yeah, I mean, I can't really tell you guys how, I'm sure you're just absolutely dying to hear how our Christmases were, but we don't know because they haven't happened yet. But Christmas is currently about 2 weeks away. And that is crazy. I was thinking on my walk, I was walking right before this, and it's kind of like this week, especially it's like feels more wintry. It's not that it's necessarily cold. It's really not cold. It's like 70 degrees, but it's like muggy outside, which that's just how the winters are in Louisiana. It's like not cold. It's just muggy. But I haven't really been like doing that much. Like I haven't been listening to that much Christmas music. I haven't been watching that many Christmas movies. I don't know what it is. And I honestly don't know what I do during my days. I just sit and then the day's over. But anyway, I haven't been doing that much Christmassy stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that honestly, that is partly like moving out. I mean, I know you've been like, in college and stuff, but like when you went home, like it was to your parents' house. Like
exactly. Yeah.
That is something that I have not felt. This is so sad, but like I have not really felt like it was like true Christmas, honestly, since I was in college, which was years ago. So
where are you, Christmas? I cannot find you.
We've had too much singing in this episode
everybody's
already,
like actually going to unsubscribe.
3 minutes in.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. Of course, everybody listening to this is like, okay, move on. Christmas is over. But I'm sure that you guys can relate. Like I have my Christmas tree and stuff up, but it's the things that make it. I was thinking like this will be my first Christmas where I won't wake up in like my mom's house on Christmas. Of course I could go sleep over there, but I have my dog, so I'm not going to. So like it'll be the first year that I'll wake up, and it was the same with Thanksgiving, like the first year that I had to like go to my mom's house for Thanksgiving. So it's definitely different, and I think we talked about this in last week's episode, that we're kind of in like a weird phase where like we're making our own traditions, but not quite, because it's not like we have our own kids yet,
right?
Or like our own full families. So like I'm just kind of making my traditions on like my own, which are still usually involving my family, but like kind of on my own. Anyway.
Right. And I think Austin and I are in like a weird transition phase as well, because like I have like my family's tradition, and then like he has his family's traditions, and then like my parents are divorced, so there's like multiple families, and then there's like we're trying to create traditions, but then we're also
and then you're also like engaged.
yeah, and like it's just like a weird time in life, I feel like.
Yeah,
but
I have the
and I
same
think
thing with like the divorced parents, like especially
yeah.
this year is like the first year without my grandma, so it's just all like
And I think that
vibes.
like honestly, I think that like growing up, wow, this is a really depressing like first 5 minutes of our first episode. But like I think growing up is honestly realizing that like the holiday traditions that you had as a kid are not always going to be the same. Like I think
Yes,
you
I used to
always
be
think
so
like
like I used to be
yeah,
so like like if anything changed, I would be so upset. But then
yeah.
now I'm like, it's just how it is.
Yeah, like I think as like a little kid you think like, oh, this is just how it's going to be like literally
Forever,
forever,
yeah.
especially because you see your parent, maybe this is just me, but you see your parents and you're like, oh, before I was here this is how they did it, which like
Mm-hmm.
in reality probably not, because you weren't
Exactly.
a thing.
Yeah.
So but yeah, then like you realize like, oh, and I think especially when you do have divorced parents things switch up, but
Yeah.
whatever, we need to move on from
I was about to say the depressing stuff needs to be over. This is actually a super, super requested episode. We're
I
coming
would
in
say our
hot.
most highly
Yeah, this is
requested.
absolutely the most highly requested episode, coming in hot in the beginning of the year, getting you guys kind of started on the right track, thinking about the right things at the beginning of the year. We are having Katie on. She's a CPA, and she kind of works specifically to help like small businesses. We haven't actually chatted with her yet, but I know that she will have lots of good stuff to say. We're going to chat about like taxes for small business owners, kind of like just bookkeeping, like how you should be doing that, why you should be doing that, even further than just taxes. There's a lot of reasons, like understanding what your profits are, like understanding like, oh, I'm spending way too much on supplies, helping with your pricing and stuff like that. So I know that Alexis and I have a lot we can learn from her. That's why this episode's been requested for forever, but we did not want to try to do it ourselves. So we were waiting to find the perfect guest to be able to help us discuss it, because we don't have the knowledge. We've each done taxes as somebody who's self-employed 1 year, but that does not qualify you at all.
Yeah, and I think just in general, like that is something that we've realized, like with the podcast in general, is that we'd rather have like we never claim to be professionals. Like we want to have other people come in to be that like, you know, more reliable source.
Yeah.
So.
And on that note, obviously like throughout 2021, we kind of found our voice as a podcast, I would say. But now I feel like we're kind of set, and I feel like you guys kind of understand like what you're going to be getting here too. So that being said, if you have any requests for guests or episodes or anything specific, we're always asking in the Facebook group. So if you haven't joined the Facebook group, it's called Check Your Aesthetic Community. You can find it just either in the link in our bio, in the links under this episode, in the links under this episode on YouTube, or you can just search it on Facebook. But we're always asking, and you guys can feel free to post in there and be like, hey, I want to hear an episode about this, and tag me and Alexis. Like you can do it however you want, or DM us. Which by the time y'all are listening to this, I hope it's resolved, but our DMs on Instagram aren't working and haven't been for like a week.
Yes, they have not been working, and they have not been working on my Instagram either.
It's so annoying.
I have discovered that my DMs are working on my computer. So like maybe we can try getting into them.
That's interesting.
On the computer after this. But yeah,
if you guys have any specific requests, we're here to give you what you want. We will make it happen for you. Sometimes you guys request that we have really famous people on. They don't answer their emails, you guys. We don't have enough clout for that. If you have any connections, hit us up. But anyway, I guess, do you have anything else to say before we hop in?
I guess just thank you for the past year.
Yes.
I think, you know, I know broken record, but like we sometimes forget that people actually listen, but I think like getting DMs and like people just responding to things that we talk about in our lives, like that is like, I mean, I know that we've put like less of a focus on our own stuff, but I think like we try to update you guys on little aspects of our lives, and having you guys DM us and give advice and just like well wishes and stuff. I think that that's so nice, and having you guys support even like with other guests and stuff. And if you've come from if you've only been here, if this is your first episode listening, if this is your second, whatever, I just like I appreciate it so much. And I think that it's so crazy that we only started this like a little over a year ago, and I feel like we've already grown like so much, and I'm very excited to see what 2022 where it takes us.
Yes, agreed.
So,
and
yeah.
also huge shout out to anybody who was a guest in 2021. As
Yes.
you guys, like I just kind of said, like we've really transitioned more to having guests on, to give y'all knowledge, because we've kind of exhausted everything we have to share with you guys. Not to say there won't be any solos
Yeah.
ever again, but those are fewer and more far between. But if you've been a guest in 2021, we appreciate you. We learned so much from all of you, and we consider all of our guests truly dear friends, and we love all of them. So shout out to you guys. Shout out to everybody who's ever listened. We're going to how many episodes? Shout out to the Facebook group members. Shout out to Instagram followers. We just appreciate all of you so much. And y'all are the reason that we record 3 episodes a week sometimes, even though it takes a lot of time. But yeah, we love you all. And 2022 is going to be the vibes.
The vibes. Yeah. Wow.
Anyway,
let's get into it.
Yeah, I was about to say, let's get into the content that you guys have been waiting for probably a year and a half. So let's go ahead and hop on in.
Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
We're so excited. We were saying in our intro, this is definitely our most requested episode ever in the whole world.
By far.
A lot of people don't understand everything that we're about to talk about, including us. So we're ready to learn.
It's a good time of year. It's always a time where everybody starts to think of it, holidays and like, what do I have to get in order, I think? And then you're like, oh my God. So I think the good news is, and like for anybody that's listening where they want to hear it, but they're also scared, is like, let's just take a deep breath. And the truth is, it's actually not as scary as you think. And from, the conversations that we had, it sounds like a lot of your audience is at the earlier stages, which is the perfect time to be hearing this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And this is actually the first episode, we think, probably, hopefully, if we have our cards right, this is the first episode of the year. So this is like the perfect episode to kind of start everyone off. And I totally agree. I think that is something, especially small business wise, because a lot of people are doing things themselves, that taxes and bookkeeping is something that you just push off because you're like, I'll figure it out later. But it's actually something that I think if you can start off doing things right, it actually makes things so much easier in the long run. So yeah, this is just the perfect episode to start us off.
There is a huge difference between getting it set up right from the beginning and then getting it set up once things are already working. And I'm thinking more in terms of like 2 years down the road when you actually have some real momentum going versus just some costs or some income coming through, where like you didn't get a handle on it, but it's not that big of a deal because your overall taxable income is not that much. The reason that I brought myself online in the beginning, it's really morphed a lot from then, but the reason that I decided to come online was to reach people at this stage to prevent mistakes that I was seeing down the road. Because it was really hard for me to look at these businesses 2 years down the road and then have to be like the bearer of bad news and say like, you needed to save for taxes, you needed to pay this in. And like, now you owe more tax than you have in the bank account because it's easy to spend money as it comes in. And then it's like, now what do you do? Or you've got to untangle a mess. Or some people, like, I'm not trying to be scary, but some people will get to a point where they have reached success in their business, but they have not done it in a way that covers taxes. And when that's done, like you have no choice but to then make more money to pay for the taxes because you're not getting off the hook.
Exactly.
And it was so hard for me to look at because I'm like, oh man, this could have been prevented.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I was like, how can I help people prevent this? You know?
Right. You think when you're starting off like, oh, this is just a small thing on the side. And like, I'll just figure it out when it gets to that, but then it gets to that and then you put it off and then you need to go back. But so you started talking about how this has morphed in everything that you've been doing on the internet. So for anybody that doesn't know you, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of explain how this did morph into what it is?
Yeah, I'll try to keep that short, but I mean, basically I have the background of having an accounting degree. I worked in corporate accounting. I got a master's in tax. I worked at a CPA firm for a couple of tax seasons. I have my CPA license. I was a manager at like back at a corporate environment, which is different than working for a CPA firm. When I got pregnant with my son, got in a car accident on the way to work and had like an, oh shit, how am I supposed to do this moment? Like, how am I supposed to commute, 2 hours a day and work in corporate and be the kind of mom that I want to be? And not only does this seem like impossible, but now it's also dangerous. Like, I hadn't really thought about the driving as a mom, as a pregnant person, and literally the next day, the stars aligned, and my job, they were already going to do this, it had nothing to do with me, announced that they had this voluntary separation program. They were behind the scenes gearing up for a sale. This was September when it happened. And in January, they announced their sale. But in September, they're like, if you've been with the company for more than 5 years, you can get a severance, a 12-week severance and a bonus to quit. So they were trying to get like reduced payroll to look better for their sale. I would never have taken that, like, if I wasn't pregnant and had been in the car accident the day before, because I was saying goodbye to corporate and it was all I knew. And I had worked my entire life to get to that point. Like, I had just been promoted to a management position and I had finished my CPA the year before. And all of those things are like a really big deal in my world. And then there I am taking money to quit a really good position that I knew would not repeat, right? But I just had to trust that that was not a coincidence. And it was still scary. I think that it's an interesting lesson for me to look back and think about how scary that was and how hard it was for me to make that decision, when, like, I think some people listening would be like, I wish somebody would pay me to quit my job,
Right.
It was very fortunate. And so, but still really scary, because that was my livelihood. So I'm cutting off my livelihood for a check. But it was more than that. I wouldn't have done it without being pregnant. Like, if it was a year prior, I wouldn't have done it. I had to be pregnant and have the rattling car accident the day before for me to say, this is more than a coincidence. And okay, I'm listening, which, like, as a type A accountant is not really my nature. So I had to fight against that. And a month later, my son was born, and I became a new mom. And in those moments, I'm like, thank God I'm not at corporate. It just became clear to me, because to get myself through like new motherhood was a constant reminder of how much worse it would be if I had been in corporate. Right. So I'm like, thank God my focus is purely on, navigating this new season. And I guess in those moments, it got really clear to me that I didn't want to give that up ever for anything, that this wasn't just like something that I wanted to do for a year and then go back to work. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I wasn't rushing it, but like, I think just with closing off that corporate door, more possibilities opened and more people knew that I was like available. And long story short, I got 5 bookkeeping clients before I was really trying. And then I was like, this is a lot, because I have 3 kids. So that was my first son, and he was not 4 when I had my 3rd. So I had them all within 4 years. And I mean, I was busy, like pregnant all the time with babies all the time. And I'm like, I don't really want to grow this bookkeeping business, but people kept asking me to like help them with their taxes. And like I said, I looked into some of these businesses that were like small, young female led businesses. And I'm looking at them like, oh man, like I thought everybody kind of knew this stuff, knew like at least to get help here. And I could see them because I guess I glamorized entrepreneurs because it wasn't in my nature. I had to be forced into it. So I figured if you're brave enough to do that, like you're brave and you're really smart. And it's not that you're not, but I just didn't understand, like, I think how unnaturally numbers come to people who tend to start businesses, right?
Especially creative people.
That's what I was going to say, because accountants tend to stay in the job. So they're not the ones that think about the questions that you come up with when you're starting a business. Or I think your typical CPA will be like, well, you should know this. And like, not only demean your little business, but also like kind of demean you for not knowing everything that you're supposed to know. So I'm not the only accountant that is a safe space. I am surrounded by accountants who are safe spaces. So that's nice to know. There's lots of young female accountants doing exactly the same thing now, but it was through a series of events that I started like trying to figure out how I could educate entrepreneurs so that I could, make more income while not giving up so much of my time, because I saw bookkeeping as like an hours per dollar thing. Eventually, when I was pregnant with my third child, it clicked that if I hired and trained a team and grew my business and had a team, that could actually be some passive income, like when I was pursuing courses and stuff like that. So I grew my bookkeeping business intentionally over 3 months in 2019, like while pregnant with my third. And that happened. It was like such a influx of like clients and team members and success that like now what I do is teach accountants how to do the same. So I think the biggest focus, if you look me up on social media, is going to be me talking to bookkeepers. But I do I have about 25 bookkeeping clients who are young female business owners predominantly, and mostly online business owners, because I'm just so passionate about it. So I have my bookkeeping business, and then I show accountants and bookkeepers how like they can do the same, how they can take like their skills, have that life of freedom, but also really give a lot of value to their clients in alleviating these burdens and fears.
Okay. So for somebody who's listening, we have a range of listeners, but there's a number of people who listen, who may have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, but may have either not started a business yet, or don't know where to start, or they want to start a business, but they're listening to our podcast to kind of get the confidence. So for somebody who's listening and they're like, shit, what does any of this even mean? Kind of explain bookkeeping and like the basics of, I guess, like the jargon, to like just the basics of what everybody would need to know if they're going to start a business.
So what is bookkeeping?
Yes, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Really, I think that there's two separate things. Some people will do both, but I like to keep it separate. And I think bookkeeping is one thing and tax is a completely different thing. Bookkeeping is really, really simple. Like, I'm glad you asked, because it's not that complex. It doesn't mean that it doesn't get like convoluted, but it's literally tracking what your sales are minus what your costs were and coming up with profit. And profit is what you're taxed on. And not only is profit what you're taxed on, profit is what really freaking matters in your business.
Yeah.
So because you can have, I mean, I talk about this a lot, but like in the online space, if you're dabbling in like, should I start a business? You're hearing tons of stuff about 6-figure businesses and 6-figure launches and 7-figure businesses and multiple 7-figure businesses and 100K months and stuff like that. That is not a whole picture. Is that stuff real? Yeah, that's real. That's possible. But is that the measure of success? No, it is not a whole picture at all. It actually tells me absolutely nothing about what your life looks like, what kind of stress you're under, and if you're bringing home anything, or you can easily be in debt. Like you can easily, probably more so easily, be in debt with like a 7-figure sales business than you can with like something simpler. And that's not to deter, it's just to keep the focus on what is my business actually doing at the end of the day. And bookkeeping is going to tell you that. And when you're just getting started, it's way simpler. You're literally tracking sales and any cost of doing business.
Right. Supplies or whatever.
Yeah. Subtracting it, and that's your profit. And so like, I think that bookkeeping is best done monthly. Some people do it weekly because they really love it. I think maybe if you're just getting started and there's some celebration maybe in that, or like it keeps you in line on what your personal threshold is for spending, that looking at it weekly, if there's not too many transactions, is something some people do kind of ceremoniously. That's fine. I think monthly gives me at least a big enough, a good enough picture. And what I love about bookkeeping is that it's this recurring process. It should be a recurring process in your business, at least monthly. And then when you look at that, like in this clear as day format, you're going to see where your money's coming from, where your money is going, how valuable your sources of income are, and how valuable your expenses are. And like some expenses might be your biggest expenses, but they're also the thing that allows you to do everything. So it's worth it. And there's no, like, you're not judging your spending when you can see where it's going. Right. So that's bookkeeping. And tax is what you have to pay to the government on what you make. And so that's on profit. But what's dangerous about tax, or only looking at your numbers come tax time, is it's ancient freaking history. So there's two problems with that. There's two problems. One, cash flow, like we just talked about. So
Yeah.
like if you do your taxes on time in April, you're looking at what you owe from January to December of the year before. You're already 16 months removed from, you know, one of the months that you're getting taxed on.
Right.
And you have different taxes as a self-employed person.
Yeah.
And so that can add up. It's not a bad thing. It's a little technical for me to get into, but like you have more taxes mostly because it's not being managed by somebody else, because you're the employee and the employer. And what you might not know if you're just an employee today is that your employer is paying some payroll taxes on your wages that you don't see that on your paycheck. They just do that. You might not know that that happens. With your employer gone, the IRS looks to you for both pieces. So you pay, it's really only 7.5% more, basically. I'm rounding. But it's the fact that it's not managed that gets really difficult. So like it's not coming right off the top. You're getting all of the money and you really should be putting it aside regularly. Regularly. Like even monthly is maybe not enough on that. If you're
I learned that one the hard way last tax season, you guys, because you're, especially as like a business, everybody knows, like, especially in each quarter. And I know that you can file quarterly taxes, but there's some people should, some people shouldn't, you know, there's like different reasons to do or not do that. But you really are like, you could be having a lull in your business at the time when taxes are due. It's not like you can just be like, hey, sorry, IRS, I actually haven't made as much money this month, so I'm just going to wait. Like, that's not how it works. So you have to set your money aside. And that's something that I learned from my first year of taxes. Fun. Love taxes.
Yeah. So there's that. There's that, which I think people kind of know exists, but there's this other like benefit to bookkeeping that I think I finally identified. I think this is honestly where like I started signing a lot of clients, when I finally understood that taxes wasn't enough to motivate a small business owner. It was the idea that looking at your numbers regularly allows you to see what's happening so you can make adjustments in real time.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at your books at the end of the year and then going like, wait, I made $100,000 in sales and I celebrated that every month. But when I look at it, I literally made $20,000 of profit.
Yeah.
Are you really doing that great? No, you're not.
Right.
But could you have made adjustments throughout the month to change that? Yes.
Yeah.
And so when you look at that in real time and like you stop fearing it or judging what it's going to mean and just allow it to like literally be a story, let's not even call it data. Like it is a story of what happened. And then you can make of it what you will as the business owner who understands. And sometimes you're not going to be profitable. Like in the beginning, it's rare for people to profit like on month one. So I'm not judging that. It's just that the idea has to be, the goal has to be, let's get profitable and let's get profitable quickly. And I start to lose people here sometimes with the concept of like leading with profit, because it's like, oh, well, I don't just do this for the money. Like I want to be able to live, but I'm not like a materialistic person. I'm not greedy, right? So I like to say that profit is the how to your why. Like if you know why you're starting a business, and especially if it's outside of you, if it's like, I really want to help people X, Y, Z. If you don't have a business that profits and sustains itself and allows you to pay for your life, it's not sustainable, which means you cannot continue to live out that mission.
Right.
Yeah.
So to me, bookkeeping is really powerful in that it helps you focus on profit, which helps you sustain your business, which helps you live the life that you want, and also continue to serve others and to the best of your abilities. And tax is taking those numbers at the end of the year and paying it to the government.
Right.
Yeah.
I know personally that bookkeeping has also just been able to show me trends and kind of see like month to month if something is going up or going down, and kind of also, now that I've been in business for multiple years at this point, then also comparing months of different years to each other and kind of seeing trends in that. So I think that that's definitely another benefit, I guess, of just kind of knowing what's going on in your business, because it's yourself. You're doing everything by yourself, so you want to make sure that you know what's going on. But so if someone is kind of, I know that, like we said in the beginning, with starting a business, you kind of feel like that there's kind of this stigma, I guess, of like, oh, it's just this small little thing. I just have a tiny little Etsy. I don't need to start filing taxes, or I don't need to whatever, because it's under a certain amount of money. What is the threshold of kind of like deciding between if something is a hobby or becoming a business.
Well, technically, like the IRS would say, if you have $1 of profit, you have to pay tax on it.
Mhm.
So are you profiting? You need to be reporting it like from day one, because the risk of not doing it, it just is not worth it. Like, and then some people will say like, well, I'm only spending money. And so like, why would I claim that? Well, two reasons, although I'm trying not to get into like super technical stuff. If it's literally a hobby that you do for fun and you're losing money on it, then okay, don't file taxes and the government's going to be fine with you taking a personal loss. If you're profiting, you have to file taxes. Okay. $1 is enough. But if you have a loss and it's a loss because this is a startup year, like, and the IRS would have leniency towards like how long. You can't operate at a loss for 5 years. The IRS will say that is not a business, that is a hobby, because nobody would stay in an unprofitable business for 5 years, right? And I mean, you may have workarounds. You can look up the hobby loss rules if you want to know what I'm talking about. That's like a Googleable thing, hobby loss rules. If you treat it like a business, and actually one of the things on there that would make it be deemed a business is doing regular bookkeeping or hiring somebody to do it for you. If you're not doing bookkeeping and you're operating at a loss for multiple years, you're a hobby. And if you claim those losses, the IRS can come back and disallow those deductions and charge you on it. But I think most people, when they ask that question, is like, well, I only lost money, so should I claim it? If you're doing this in a startup year and you expect to have money, the goal is to have money, you'll close it down after 2 years if you're not profitable. It is a business and you should claim it because you can offset that from your day job and like pay less in taxes for taking the loss. And if it's all you do and you only take a loss, you won't get like money back, but you'll be able to carry that loss forward to the next year, which will reduce your taxes in the next year. So if you don't claim a loss, you're just giving the IRS extra money. If you want to do that, again, they're not going to complain, but I don't know why anyone would want to do that.
And I think that speaks to the idea of like, I think a lot of people think like, oh, should I be bookkeeping? Do I need to do that? Or is it just a hobby? But like you said, if your profit's $1, so you should, so that you can obviously, I guess, for the reasons that we just talked about, but also so you don't get behind and get yourself in a bind where you have to go through a year's worth of expenses and income and try to figure that out yourself. Definitely can get complicated.
And I think there's something to like highlight there, right? With like, if my business is just a hobby, so I don't need to do bookkeeping or I don't need to do taxes. I think it's like a come to Jesus moment with yourself. Like, is that what I want it to be? I think if you're listening to this podcast all the way through to this point, the answer is no. Like you have a desire to have a business and you want it to profit someday. Today you're calling it a hobby, but if you're making, I really mean this, if you're making hobby-based decisions around a business that you want to turn into a business, that's no way to make it happen. Like you might become an anomaly that somehow succeeds despite that, but that underlying belief that you're backing with actions, like I'm not going to do bookkeeping because I'm just a hobby, that is a good way to make sure that you always stay an unprofitable hobby. And if you want to change that, it's not hard to do your own bookkeeping, especially in the beginning stages, especially if you are a service-based solopreneur. It's actually not hard to track that stuff so that you can, set aside 15 minutes max if you do it weekly, 15 minutes and maybe 30 minutes for the month if you're just getting started. If you want to set aside that time, it could almost be like, I'm getting a little nuts, but I mean everything that I'm saying. You want to have a ceremony that like says, I'm doing this, like an act of self-care. I'm going to give my business and myself 15 minutes a week to sit here and quantify what I brought in and what I spent because I care enough about my vision and my goals. I care enough about myself and I deserve that. Like there's nothing wrong with me taking this time, and it might be scary at first, but starting on the ground level is a really good way to make it not scary because you're never going to let it snowball out of your control.
And that's actually something that I had been in my business for, I don't remember how long, but it was like a couple months before tax season, I'd say. And I remember just having it on my to-do list over and over, like record expenses. And I finally was like, all right, I just have to do this. And honestly, it did not take me like even a percentage of how long I thought it would. And it felt so good after I did. And I set up ways for myself to continue recording on an active basis. And just knowing that I had that there was so relieving. And knowing that I could quickly, like, if I went to wherever and got materials, I could just come home and write that off. And I know you say like, monthly, but if I wanted to, I could just go in and write that, down and record that expense when I felt so inclined. But I totally agree. I think that that's a really nice feeling. But since I said the word accidentally write off, I kind of remembered instantly made me think of the Schitt's Creek episode of write-offs. And so what actually is a write-off? And especially for a small business owner, what does that mean for them? And there's also just so many different aspects of business too, and especially for our audience, influencers or a service provider or a small business owner like jewelry business. What is write-offs, and what does that look like for different businesses?
Yeah, so write-offs are also sometimes called like deductions, and they're basically interchangeable, and it just lowers what you pay on your taxes. So it's the expense portion, expense, deduction, write-off. I probably say expenses, costs, cost of doing business. I try not to use expenses because I know it's like sort of jargon, but they're all the same thing. It's money that you spend for the purpose of generating income.
Yeah.
And the IRS would like to see that it is ordinary and necessary in your line of business. That it's standard in your industry. So yes, to your point, it would depend by industry, but the long-term purpose has to be that it's for the purpose of making money. It's for the purpose of generating income. And so like easy, no-brainer things, bank service charges, softwares and subscriptions for doing business. If you're mailing anything out, the cost of shipping, the cost of packaging, office supplies, courses and coaches for business. Yes, deductible. Can you think of anything outside of that? There's quite a few. If you pay like affiliate expenses or referral bonuses, those things are write-offs.
What if there's a travel blogger? Does their travel expenses count as a write-off or no?
If it's for business. So the thing, like the test that I like to do, if you're getting into really technical stuff, honestly, like I thought about this too. One of the things is you should have support. So like in the beginning stages, it's okay to like track your very beginning stuff. But when you get profitable and when you get serious and when you start to realize that like your time is better spent elsewhere, you should have a bookkeeper and you should have a CPA. And I really think that you should have a CPA at year end regardless. I really do. I don't think it's worth, like, let's be honest, you're not a tax expert. So there's a wide range of people. There's a wide range of people who will charge like different fees in different areas. You can almost get like any of it. You do kind of get what you pay for, but you don't need to pay $2,000 when you just started a business. If you have records, you want to save yourself some time, give them some bookkeeping, give them numbers. Do not give them statements, and you'll have support. So you should run this by your CPA. But I like to give this example of like, if you were to sit across from the IRS, which isn't going to happen, but if you were going to, and like there was a man in a suit asking you questions, would you be able to back up that is a business expense without turning red? If so, if so, it's probably deductible. If you're stretching it, I probably wouldn't take the risk, because if you get really aggressive and you're writing off things that are not write-offs, that are not, standard in your line of work, and you get audited and they say, all right, that's not a business expense. I think it's important to understand that what happens is you pay back that tax plus penalty and interest. You have to pay for someone to represent you. It's a big headache, and it's not really worth it. If you get to that point where you're making enough income to want to deduct enough stuff, you should have a CPA who will help you minimize your tax expense legally. There's like retirement accounts that you can do. There's a lot of like strategic stuff that you can do when you get to that level, and do it right so that you're not jeopardizing yourself.
Right. I like to think of it the way that someone told me to think about it is, if you imagine yourself not in business, and if you would not be purchasing this thing if you weren't in business, then that is a write-off. But if you would still like, if I was gonna, obviously I wouldn't write off Starbucks, but like I'm gonna go to Starbucks whether I have a business or not. So obviously that's not gonna be a write-off. But like, I don't know, my, you know, mailers for my Etsy shop, obviously I would not be buying hundreds of mailers if I didn't have a business. So that is a write-off. But
I think that's a good test for some things. When there is a mixed personal use is when it gets slippery, because like, so Starbucks, like, it depends. Are you giving a $15 gift card to a new client? Because that is a write-off. Are you meeting a client there? That's a write-off. But if you're on your way to the office, like I am sometimes, and I just want to get a coffee, the fact that I'm going to drink that while I'm working doesn't make it a write-off.
Yeah.
right. Right.
The fact that I Uber Eats myself a meal because I don't feel like, you know, getting up is not a write-off.
Right.
And so, and then you want to be reasonable, like you really want to be reasonable, and you want to do it to where if someone were to dig through it, it wouldn't look ridiculous. So
Yeah.
if every time you go to Starbucks, you put it on your business card, it's a good way to disallow all meals, because they're not going to trust that you use any discernment. And a really good tip, like when you mentioned writing down the expense, I started to think a way to avoid having to write down expenses and feel like you're going to miss them is open up a separate account for business today.
Yep.
I don't care what stage of business you're at. If you plan on having a real business, today is the best time to do it, because you won't have to be switching over all of your subscriptions that you pay for.
Yeah.
And as you get your clients, like if you use Etsy, you map that to your business bank account. It should be your business bank account. If you end up like changing it, you're going to have to open a new account, change over all of the ways that money comes through, change over all of the ways that money goes out. And so like today is a great day to get yourself a business account. And even if you haven't yet, like if the only thing that you take away is Katie said that I should get my own business account, rule number one, please do that. That is literally my rule number one. It comes before doing regular bookkeeping. Because even if you slack on the bookkeeping, if all of your income and expenses go through there, you can pull those statements and find them. You won't miss a deduction. So
it's actually so easy to just like go through the same bank that you already are. It's not this process of having to find a completely new bank. Like I have a account for my business, and it's just the same. It's the same like high up account as my person, because I am my business, you know, my business owner is me. So I just have my account, and then I have my business, and then I have my personal, and it's so easy to just like, you know, separate everything. So it's not this huge process of like intimidating thing. And a lot of them you can do on like the phone or the internet to set up a business account.
Yeah, I do Bank of America personally, and you can do it online. You don't have to go anywhere. And like COVID has really helped with some of that, because they try to make it easier for you to do.
Right.
I wanted to just touch on, you don't want to miss items of income or items of like spending, because if you miss income, you're at risk. And because you underpaid your taxes. So you're risking that like you get caught. And in today's world, everything is really traceable. So like if you're not getting paid cash, it's actually very easy for them to trace you if they decide that they want to. And then with your costs, well, they just can, you know, it's like, is it likely? Probably not. So if I'm scaring the crap out of you, like take a couple deep breaths. I personally just like to know that like I'm good. You know?
You're covered.
With your costs, if you miss those, you're not in trouble, but you overspent. Neither one is good.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think forget to deduct it.
And I worked with a CPA the last time I did my taxes, because things got complicated, and where it got really complicated was like mileage. You're driving to the post office. I wouldn't have been driving to the post office had it not been for my business. And I was driving to the post office every day. So that's something you want to consider. Sometimes it even gets down to like Wi-Fi and like all of that kind of stuff. And that's where it gets super complicated. And that's why I was like, I'm not doing this myself. Like I can't. And I feel like that's stuff that's easy to mess up. And that's where like, you can't be like, oh, but I have this, like you said, mixed personal use. I think those are things that really get complicated.
Mixed personal use is a good rule of thumb for like, I need to look up the rules for this. Meals. Actually this year it's 100% deductible. It's like a COVID stimulus thing for restaurants. to incentivize business owners to go to restaurants and have business meetings and stuff. So, but that's not usually the case. It's usually 50%. So there's a special rule for that. And then it has to have a business purpose. You can't just be a business owner going. So that's one special rule. Like you mentioned, your cell phone and your internet, the good news is you're paying that same amount, whether or not you have a business, you get to write off a portion of it.
Right.
It's supposed to be your business percentage. And miles. Yeah. So I would say if you're not doing a ton of driving for work, if most of your miles are business, most of your miles are personal, I recommend just taking the standard mileage deduction. This is a good question. I think people have a lot of questions and they mess this up. Take the standard mileage deduction. To your point, track your business miles. In my small biz starter kit, I have a mileage log and it's in Google Sheets. So if you have the Google Drive, thing on your phone, you can even do that as you're going, or even put in your notes, went to the post office, and then the round trip post office, and you can add that in later.
Exactly.
But you want to track your miles, and you get a fixed amount per mile that you get to deduct. So it's real easy. You just take the mileage times, I think it's 56 cents this year. It changes every year. And then you can take that deduction. So you just want to track the miles and do that. And I think it's best to track them in real time, but you could back into it at the end of the year by looking at your statement and seeing, when did you get charged by the post office? So you must have gone to the post office that day. Exactly. When did you go to Target? You must have gone there. So mileage for business is anything that you did just for the purpose of your business. So going to the post office, yes, it is deductible. Going to a business meeting or a networking event, deductible. Going and buying office supplies is actually deductible too. Those kind of things.
Yeah. I had to do like you said, backtrack. And what my CPA said was, she's like, we're just going to go on the lower end of your best what we can backtrack. We know not every Target trip was for your business, and you obviously can't remember every single one. So we'll go on the low end of what seems reasonable so that you don't get yourself in any trouble. And I feel like it's worthwhile to mention in general with all of this stuff. I think not only does it sound overwhelming as somebody who's younger, like most of our audiences, and wants to start a business, it's also overwhelming as a woman, in my opinion. Sometimes when I walk in the bank, I think everybody thinks I'm an idiot. Immediately, because I'm a woman. And sometimes I think that they actually do think that, but maybe they don't. But yeah, I feel like it's worthwhile to mention a lot of our listeners are females. And I feel like a lot of times these are the conversations that we don't have that are important to have. So don't be scared to open a business bank account. Don't be scared to talk to a CPA. Like you said, judgment-free zone, find a CPA that obviously is not going to treat you like you're an idiot, because that's no fun. But I just felt like that was worthwhile to mention. But yeah, so you mentioned
a lot of good points in there.
If you want to expand, you can take it away.
I'm going to take notes, so you can go ahead. I'm going to elaborate on some of your points. Yes.
But yeah, I do think that, that I've been scared before. That's the reason I haven't opened up a business bank account, is because I'm scared of the bank. I just opened up a savings account because I was scared of the bank. So you don't have to be scared of the bank. I actually found a banker that was, what are they called?
Yeah, I actually went in person to set up my business account, and the woman that I talked to was so nice. And I think I also feel that we kind of touched on this before, but there's this feeling of, oh, it's just my tiny business or whatever. And that you feel almost that your business is not worthy of going to the bank and talking to someone about it. It's not worthy of tracking these things. And I know that when I went to the bank, she was so interested in everything that I was talking about. They're not going to make you oh, you have a small business, that's stupid. They're never going to act like that. They're going to be excited for you that you've started a business. They're going to be excited for you that you made that step. She even congratulated me on coming in and said that was an important big milestone to record. So, and I think she's right that it is, it does take some courage, I think, to say, no, my business actually is important and it does deserve to be taken seriously. And that's from other people and from yourself. Yeah. So not to sound dramatic and that you have to go make an account right now or you're gonna die, but yeah,
I'm saying that. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, but all of those points are so good. And I think that somebody could have the experience where they walk into a bank in some place and get the wrong teller. It does make them feel that way. And if they do, take your business elsewhere.
Yeah.
And if your CPA makes you feel like they're judging you, or they don't take time and they rush you, because those do exist, go elsewhere. Like let yourself like gut check literally all of those decisions, but don't let them stop you from finding the place that's not going to be like that, because avoiding it in fear is actually really heavy. And it has like physical, tangible results, like allowing that to be this barrier. Like when you talked about thinking I need to do my expenses, like that, I visualize that being on my to-do list and me ignoring that. I've got a lot of things like that in my life. It's just, it's not that one. But if that were on my list for a year, it feels bad. You can almost feel it in your body, and the tightness. Facing it feels good. So if you want to get on the other side of that, like just act in courage anyway, because once you open the bank account is open. Once you sit down and look at your numbers, I promise you, because like not only do I have 25 clients active right now and coach bookkeepers, but like I have this small biz starter kit we're going to talk about in a minute that 300 people have purchased, and I hear it all the time that like I finally did it and this feels so good. I have never had anybody say that they faced their numbers and they cried themselves to sleep.
They're like, I hate it, I'm never doing it again. Like,
even if it's bad, it's clear. And then like it's non-judgmental.
What you have to manage with.
Yeah. And if you want to do that in the safest space of all, do it alone and let the feelings come up, and then know that like it's now within your control to make some different choices. And that's the clarity that it gives you by facing it. But I also wanted to touch on the female aspect of it, because it's real and it makes perfect sense, because women weren't even allowed to work until recently and couldn't even have checking accounts until recently. And if you just want to understand a little bit more of that, like when I listened to Rachel Rodgers and I joined her membership for a while, and she has that book, We Should All Be Millionaires. And if you want to like figure out where some of that is and make it make sense and then also work through it, I highly recommend looking at Rachel Rodgers' stuff.
Yeah, I think, I do think that we forget that when you say recently, like it really was recently that women were allowed to have bank accounts without the permission or the sign off of their husband. Like it's
or like it was the 70s.
Yeah, like, exactly. Like
it was in our mother's lifetime.
Literally, like that truly was just not that long ago. So I think that there's a lot of shame that comes along with, like, for me, not understanding things. I feel like, oh, well, like you said, like I should know this. So I don't want to ask anybody, because then they're going to know that I don't. But it's so much better. All you have to do is ask once, then it's explained to you, or listen to this podcast, and then So anyway, so let's talk about the small business starter kit. For people who are sitting here being like, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to track all my stuff. I'm going to do bookkeep. How do I do it? So kind of explain that and how everything that you offer.
Yeah, I'll start by explaining maybe like the 4 ways that you can do bookkeeping, which I've never done before, but like you can have somebody do it for you. It's typically going to be like, even if you're small, it's going to be like 200 and up. Mine are like more like 350, 400. So if that sounds like, oh my God, I can't do that today, then you want to find a way to still get it done. And if it doesn't feel like, oh my God, I can't do that today, and you think about like the fact that you otherwise might not do it, or you otherwise might mess it up, or your business is growing and your time is better spent elsewhere, it's time to get a bookkeeper. It's time to think about how many hours that would bring you back. That's number 1 and most preferred. Underneath that is like, you do it yourself somehow. And I would try to teach people how to use like QuickBooks. I'm sure you've heard of QuickBooks. Xero is a great bookkeeping platform that I love. People recommend Wave. Honestly, I hate it. So I don't recommend Wave for actual bookkeeping. For invoicing, sure. For bookkeeping, no. And long-term for invoicing, no. It doesn't feed well with softwares. But you can do it if your business doesn't have like tons of volume. But anyway, getting into QuickBooks or Xero, that's where bookkeeping can get kind of complicated, because there's certain places that like transfers go. And if you mess one thing up, the whole thing kind of messes up. And while I could teach you, the long-term goal is not for you to learn how to become a bookkeeper. The long-term goal is for you to understand your finances, have something that you can give your tax preparer, and then ultimately, I really think, hire it out. But like for now, you could, if you're going to track bookkeeping yourself, you could get into a software that you're likely going to pay around $30 a month for, Botch or Not Touch.
That's what I did.
You can keep your own, you can keep your own self-made template, which, like, no offense to anybody's template, but I've seen them all and they're really just not great. I go in and I'm like, what is this? This is like this long laundry list of just like expenses. There's a better way to do it. And so I merged them all and I created a Google Sheets template that is like, it's really simple. It's easy to look at. It has drop-down boxes of income categories and expense categories that you can customize for your business, which is really nice. And then you have a tab for each month and you go in and you enter in items of income and items of expense. I have a demo video in there, so I'll tell you what to leave out. Like, payments to yourself are not an expense. And transfers, payments to your credit card are not an expense. It's a transfer. You leave them out. You put in items of income and items of expense. I walk you through that in the demo. You just enter those in, and then over on the right-hand side, automatically for each month, it calculates the total of the sales. It does sales by income category if you have them. So, like, I think most businesses have multiple ways that they make money, whether it's different products or different services. You can break that out all for you. So, like, I'll use an example of a copywriter. If you're a copywriter and you do a blog post versus like a sales page, you could put that separately on this and customize it very easily so that you've got the drop down. It'll show you by category how you make your money, what the highest percentage is. It'll break that out. It'll highlight it for you. And on the expenses, it does the same thing. Where did all your money go by category? What's the highest expense? So you can like kind of gauge how that feels. And then it'll summarize your total income, your total expense. It'll calculate your profit. It'll tell you what your profit percentage is, which I walk through and explain like where you want that to be and why it doesn't really quite matter, but how to think about that. I explain that in there too. So you can benchmark yourself and see, and then it'll also have like an amount that you can set aside for taxes. You plug in your tax percentage because that's going to change for each person. And then every month you can go in there and do this and then set aside the money for taxes so you're not shocked come tax time. And not only do you have this for each month, but it'll automatically summarize the quarters, automatically summarize the year. It's a Google Sheets doc. You can share it with your CPA if you get one at the end of the year. I have had people say like, oh, my CPA was so happy that it came organized. But not only that, but it's really easy for you to enter in and see the important stuff that you typically only get like from a bookkeeper or by knowing how to read bookkeeping software. When people would come to me doing their own books, I would see that they would keep QuickBooks, but it wasn't valuable and they didn't know that, like, they didn't even know what kind of reports to run or what to look at. So this kind of takes away all of the junk so that it's just the important stuff for the DIY version. And it's $127 one time, which means that like versus that 3 months or whatever it is, five months at $30 and you're going to spend more. So, and a lot of people I would see paid for QuickBooks for like a whole year and didn't use it. So it's a one-time thing. It avoids the cost and complexity of learning bookkeeping, and it is a solution before you can hire a bookkeeper. So it has that profit and loss workbook, which is super powerful. And then it also has a mileage log and a tax calendar, which actually I've got to get updated for 2022 now. But on my email list too, you'll get reminders of like, it's time to do your books and estimated taxes are due this month and stuff like that. So it's a great solution for somebody who needs a good way to do it and doesn't want to have to like reinvent the wheel or get into complicated bookkeeping stuff.
Okay. Well, so for everybody who was like, I want that. And just in general, is like, I want more from Katie. Where can they find you? Where can they purchase? Where can they do all that good stuff? Plug yourself, tell them where they can find you and purchase everything.
I'm on Instagram most at Orderly Accounting by Katie. I have a podcast, Profits and Prosecco. A lot of it is bookkeeper focused, but if you scroll, you'll see the threads that I do specifically for entrepreneurs. Stuff about increasing your profit percentages, things like that. There's probably at least 25% of it is towards entrepreneurs. So you scan the podcast. I got a great episode on S Corps in there. If you've ever heard that buzzword and you want to know more about it, I really break that down in an episode. I think it's episode 6 for that. So that's a good place to learn more in depth. And you can find me at Orderly Accounting by Katie on Instagram. And I think you're going to link the starter kit and also have the link for reminders. So if you purchase the starter kit, don't worry, you'll be on my email list anyway. If you just want to like hang out and get the reminders and try to do something on your own, you can go to the link there for the free reminders too.
Yeah.
So we'll have that link in the show notes of this episode, and we'll also have that link in the YouTube description if you're watching on YouTube.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, that was a lot of amazing information. Feeling so educated. Thank you guys for listening. Be sure to leave us a rating and review on wherever you listen to your podcasts, and subscribe to keep up with our weekly episodes.
And then follow us on TikTok at Check Your Aesthetic, and over on Instagram at Check Your Aesthetic Podcast, and our personal accounts, Katie Creative Co., AlexisAdams.co, and Orderly Accounting by Katie. And we will talk to you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.